Afternoon, everybody. It looks like we can get started here. Thank you, everyone, for joining our webinar today. We just want to talk a little bit about modern IT security today, beyond the humble firewall is what we've decided to call it. We called it that because actually we wanted to take a look beyond just the tools that we use from a technology side, to really talk a little bit more about processes and people as well. Because what we like to call the 3P approach seems to be one of the more effective ways to use the stack to be able to achieve kind of a comprehensive security strategy. I know most people tend to be pretty overwhelmed by the kind of profusion of great tools that are out there, but again, in our experience, and the industry also says, connecting people and processes together to make the best use of those tools is the best way to go. We wanted to thank a couple of our partners for being here today, for Fortinet, and the reason we also wanted to include them is because we believe that it was also important to talk about a couple of tools that would best support the holistic approach to uniting people, processes, and parts together for that comprehensive strategy. So we'll give them a little bit of time kind of later on once we tee up a little bit of the concepts. So kind of without further ado, why don't we get started? For here today, we wanted to introduce basically our partners from Fortinet over here. We've got Kareem Tucker and Chris Boland. Kareem is our channel account manager across Central Canada, and Chris is our pre-sales SE. And the reason why we also wanted Chris over here was to basically walk through a couple of the comprehensive information management solutions that they have. That's really a fancy way of just being able to say, how do we gather data from across the enterprise and be able to aggregate it and take us through a bunch of solutions that Fortinet has on those sides, just to be able to also show what the industry themselves are doing to be able to address these risks, because basically it's not just kind of a trend that's happening on a notional sense. These are very practical things that even vendors and technology providers are implementing. Overall, from an agenda, we'll start off with a little bit about intro to the company. I'll leave it up to Kareem and Chris to take you a little bit more to Fortinet later on. But we'll start off a little bit about the IT security landscape after that and what the emerging trends are in terms of the threat climate, where people seem to be struggling and what we can do about that. We'll talk a little bit about mental models and how those are really useful for framing what is really a complex topic and making it digestible and achievable in small kind of incremental chunks. That kind of leads us into point 5 over there. And the advantages of having a managed security provider at the end of the day, what should they do for you? And some good questions to ask them. Whether or not you use Pathway as that provider, my hope today is to be able to arm you with a bunch of tools and questions to be able to ask to say, have we really comprehensively covered the landscape of problems and opportunities we have to be able to secure the organization? And we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into the tools that again, are kind of a good approach and implementation from the philosophy that we've outlined here, and wrap up with a little bit of a Q&A at the end. So a little bit about ourselves, for those of you who don't know about Pathway. Again, founded in '95, we remain 100% Canadian owned with 200 technical staff. Just as a note, we happen to have a few offices in Toronto. We have one in Markham, where it's actually our head campus is located, and another office in North York. An office also out of Montreal, Quebec, and there's an office out of India that we have that we also run an engineering and a support team out of. Those logos you see at the bottom are just a sampling of the certifications we have. So thematically, I mean, we are very, very highly focused on operational excellence. Privacy and security are two of the areas in which we've definitely made a commitment to excellence. Whether you look at HIPAA, PIPEDA, PCI, safeguarding client information is really at the core of what we want to be able to do. We do not monetize client data. We are in the business of safeguarding and helping you safeguard your data. And really our business focus is for clients and industries that really have a key interest in maintaining uptime of their systems, highly critical uptime industries, whether it's healthcare, energy, oil and gas, transportation. We're not really focusing so much on the regular kind of consumer market, but really the critical services sector. And that's really where we've kind of tried to make our name and where we've been very fortunate to work with some really great companies in those verticals. Government is also a very kind of significant focus for us. And again, we've been very fortunate to participate in some great projects for the government and helping in particular to be able to do whether it's level 1 services for them or helping them to write a DR and BCP playbook for business continuity from a technical support perspective. So our expertise, let me take a kind of a moment to just give you the span of what we do and where we play. Whether it's from managed services, contact center services, networking and internet and hosting, basically we try and look at this like a so-called stack of services, whether you're talking from the facility side, hosting, and then the internet side of things in terms of really complex connectivity, contact center, obviously being able to look at support for your clients, for your products, and managed services, whether it's looking after technology for you internally. And the list of capabilities, again, we take anything from a tier 1 type technical support all the way up through looking at really complex interactions with database support, ERP support, as well as a kind of a service desk for informational and contact center. In terms of what we look at from the data center aspect, and even in networking, we really made a hybrid first approach for our technology base. And I, in particular, since I've had the tenure of CTO over here, I've really taken an approach of making sure that we've really had a hybrid and private cloud approach, but really approaching the market with a constructive outlook with even the big three, with Microsoft, Google, as well as Amazon, and really forging some strong relationships and partnerships over there, because we really do believe it's got to be a hybrid first approach. And again, we've got some great partnerships on that side as well that I've been quite excited to work with friends and partners on that side. So why don't we head into a little bit about what we were all kind of here to listen about, which is about security. Here's a bunch of logos I think we're all familiar with, whether it's on social networks or whether it's a hotel or insurance company, transportation. All of these things, obviously, I think we recognize that there have been some form of privacy scandals or data breaches that have occurred, whether they've been intentional, accidental, kind of where people have deliberately hacked into it, or whether it's just been an accidental kind of a snafu on the code side. There has been some form of a breach, at least in the last 3-4 years. Air Canada, for instance, has had a data breach that may have affected upwards of 20,000 people, and over on 1.7 mobile app users. Uber had to, for example, pay about 133 million pounds to settle legal penalizations, which happened to expose 57 million customer and driver data points. Facebook, I think, was a pretty obvious one, whether going back to the Cambridge Analytica scandal, or even the recent ones where emails were harvested. It goes back a lot to people, processes, and parts. It's not just a failure necessarily on the part side of it, or whether a hacker had penetrated it. Oftentimes, it's a lack of communication within extremely large organizations that can prevent the proper implementation of what would otherwise be a really good intention to be able to safeguard customer data. We look at some of the biggest breaches that we've had so far. I think Yahoo's been one of the kind of the biggest ones out there that we've seen so far. I think we remember back in the day, Target and Home Depot kind of started off the race over here, but since then, these stats have just been kind of growing and growing. And these, in terms of the number of millions of people that were affected. So even in terms of, for example, you look at eBay or you look at JPMC, 76 million or 145 million people data exposed. Now, we clearly know that the impacts are manifold in the sense that it does hurt the economy. There is reputational damage. And in terms of productivity losses, you get derailed from doing what you have to do in terms of your core business. You have to end up focusing on remediation. And that, as we know, ends up being quite a costly affair, notwithstanding the fact that your own customers end up having to find alternate providers and there's a loss of trust. So one, the audacious statement we will make is that it is inevitable. Not only do we believe that, we have ample evidence to be able to support that, to say, at one point someone does get breached. Oftentimes they don't know it. And that's why it's imperative to be able to have control processes that help you identify, to be able to isolate and then recover from these types of events. I don't think it's going to be an inevitable, I don't think it's necessarily going to be an easy way to be able to find out zero-day hacks and attacks, but we also have to try and train our people on how to be able to defend themselves from being exploited, because people oftentimes are one of the biggest weak points. This is a great diagram actually we picked up from our friends at Deloitte, but there are a bunch of important risk factors and control factors. We tend to look at mostly the things that are above the surface in terms of, say, a technical investigation. But I can tell you, when we've engaged with people too, the post-breach customer protection, cybersecurity improvements, as well as regulatory compliance. And this is all after the fact. Very seldom tends to happen. Because most of the time what we've seen is that there's a bit of a technical remediation aspect, but we don't even look at, for example, see a lot of customers focusing on breach notifications or how to deal with the public relations aspect. So these aspects are, you can start folding into a response strategy that has to do with business continuity as well as breach response. So when you talk about it no longer being a technology issue, it's a business one. But I should clarify what we mean by the business aspect. You've got to have a bunch of workflows and operating procedures so that if something does happen, you've got a playbook that you can crack open and say, you know what, I know exactly what to be able to run off as an operating procedure under stress, so that you're not relying upon someone's memory or someone's ability to kind of think calmly on the spot, that you've got a good playbook. So we'll take you through a little bit of the IT security landscape. I should, preface and say that we're probably not going to tell you a heck of a lot that you already don't know. We're just going to try and arm you with a bunch of tools and mental models that'll help you better encapsulate and be able to execute this a little bit better. There are small and mid-sized companies that are targeted. In fact, in 2018 alone, 66% of SMEs experienced a cyber attack. Now, again, I should say, not all of them knew it, sometimes until many months after the fact, when they realized that some form of exfiltration or data theft had occurred, that they don't notice it on the spot when it is happening. 70% of SMBs are impacted by cyber attacks, whether known or unknown. And it's not just only certain industries, it's 16 industries and counting. The most popular ones seem to be the ones that are holding on to a lot of data, for example, social networks or transportation companies. But healthcare, for example, is becoming increasingly targeted. Transportation and energy, these are economic targets. They're not just targets of opportunity. And Canada is actually one of the has the third most cyber incidents last year, kind of within the G20. Unsurprising, because we also happen to be one of the largest economies in the world, and we also are very heavily technology dependent. So unsurprisingly, that makes us a target. And does the average cost, either direct to the economy or plus combined with the direct costs of remediation and damage. And in terms of the actual budget allocation, what we look at is, in the terms of the cost of cybercrime over the years, it's increased by 72%. However, we haven't managed to keep pace in terms of the budget that we've allocated for IT security. And by what I say in terms of the royal we as an industry, we as a peer group, we in the Canadian economy, the budget has increased only anywhere between 8 and 13%, and we're being generous over there. So if you look at these stats, there's clearly room for allocating a budget. But it's not, like we mentioned, just only on equipment. There's also on training as well as processes. So this is where we would certainly encourage you to start at least having a dialogue to see what areas are there for improvement, for improving your processes internally, even for training and awareness, your own internal IT policies, and even white hatting or hiring an external firm to be able to test out the resiliency of your processes. So how do we reduce the gap in terms of the annual cost? For you eagle-eyed viewers there, you're probably noticing that the cost of the data breaches here are in the trillions, and that from 2017, that you've had something like 750 billion in cost. That's going to escalate to about 2.5 trillion by 2022. However, the annual cybersecurity spending is only in the billions. And so if you have a few orders of magnitude to be able to catch up there, clearly we can't increase just only material spending. There's also got to be a closer dialogue with both in terms of policy and with policymakers as well as the government to figure out what is a good control mechanism. There are, by the way, a lot of government support programs that are out there that support cybersecurity as well as R&D initiatives. So if you need further info about how to leverage those, please feel free to contact us after the webinar. We'd be happy to kind of point you towards some of those programs. So changing nature of threats, we talk about things that certainly are maturing. It's no longer, for example, in the 80s or 90s where you'd end up getting some form of a static kiddie script or a piece of malware. Viruses and malware these days adapt. They are not only sophisticated, they seem to be kind of quasi-intelligent. They know how to evade detection, and they know how to trap users. And the vectors are many. So for example, it's no longer you just end up going to a website. You can end up having devices infected even just sitting in a cafe if you're on the wireless, because depending on your operating system, it may not be very secured. Someone can break into your machine just remotely sitting in a coffee shop. I managed to do that kind of test recently last year when I sat down at a bunch of coffee shops to just try and see with a honeypot laptop how many people would be trying to attempt to break through. And it turns out that those routers, it's not necessarily someone that's in the coffee shop that we're trying to hack, but the routers themselves have been infected and have been used as a jumping point to try and break into people's data there. So again, just a little bit of a sobering stat, but it's basically everywhere. So where do we see the emerging kind of threat climate? We said we started off with a little bit of an endpoint device threat. I think this is something with which everyone is familiar, is antiviruses, software. Well, what is antivirus software good for? It just keeps, kind of static scripts away. However, here's the world in which we live. Everyone has managed to put at least some type of workload within the cloud. A lot of people have a BYOD policy. There's ransomware, which everyone is really, really frightened of these days, and rightly so. IoT devices, everyone is using, at least some form of, it's either a smart monitor or a Nest home thermostat or something to that effect at home, or a smart appliance. Volumetric attacks where someone, can just attack the website and overload it with a lot of traffic. And AI-powered attacks, where these are actually becoming increasingly common, where they learn and adapt. This is a kind of a developing area, and going back to kind of my area of specialty in kind of distributed systems and artificial intelligence, I am genuinely concerned about the AI-powered attacks, which would end up effectively leveraging all these different attack vectors together and kind of making a smart virus that would be able to lean on almost any type of attack methodology. Spear phishing is just kind of a fancy term for being able to say specific people get targeted. And this is social engineering kind of at its best. And this is probably one of the biggest weak points, because machines, we can have them look after themselves, but ultimately people run them. So if we look at on an industry-wide scale, what's happening there, we look at a whole bunch of trends from cloud SaaS to biometric security growth, and whether we're using something on the cloud or leveraging ML and AI, the risks are also kind of obvious, but in some cases not fully addressed. So for example, the fact that we're using a lot of SaaS and PaaS and IaaS, infrastructure as a service, we should be cognizant, or at least aware, that securing credentials and that centralizing a lot of data has its own risks too. So putting everything into a single point of reliance isn't always the best until you have assuredness that if someone does end up getting a handle on your data, they can't decrypt it. So things like key management or password management or encryption management becomes important. The fact we run our own cloud, yes, that's an important aspect of trying to seek efficiencies from infrastructure and hardware. But how do we secure data in the event that it does get into someone else's hands? Well, it's like saying if you can end up getting your hand on my briefcase, that's fine, because you can't open it. Well, you don't have the keys. And there are encryption solutions that are countermeasures to these types of risks here. And there are kind of follow-up topics that we can talk about after the webinar if anyone is interested. For those of you folks who have moved a significant portion of your business critical infrastructure to the cloud, and how you could further secure it there. So where do we see the enterprise really struggling? I've probably given you a huge deluge of kind of statistics there, but I think every day we're hearing a whole bunch of things that we should do and should not do. How do you prioritize it? How do you proactively and continually assess your risks? And Chris will talk a little bit more about kind of continual situational awareness a little bit later on. And where should you focus? And what are some practical approaches and some compliance frameworks that'll help you along there? I think frameworks like ISO and ITIL, PCI and SOC are definitely great starts, but I would suggest that there's some simplifications and models that would kind of help you all be able to kind of get a mental model and a simplified view of how to prioritize things. And we'll kind of go into that next over here. So what we call a little bit of a mental model approach, we call it channelization, characterization, prioritization, and execution. So let me start off with a little bit of what we mean by channelization. Most people would, this is what we refer to as our stack. right down from the bottom, from facilities going all the way to your applications. Nothing really surprising here. The majority of the focus whenever we're trying to optimize or secure anything tends to just be on the parts. So we can say, you know what, I've patched my network, I've patched my compute and storage, and my applications are OS. I must be secure. Well, I'm great. Well, we'd argue, and in our experience, process is also very important, as are the people. And you really have to have all of these three working together in sync, and what we like to refer to here as the 3P model, to be able to really make all of them work together securely and productively. And there's certain activities that you perform on people, process, and parts. We refer to them as kind of the 4 M's over here, kind of going back to little memes and themes that are easy to memorize. And this is effectively our stack approach to channelization. So we can manage, monitor, migrate, or modify any of these things within here. You can modify your people, your processes, or your parts, etc. So it's out of no kind of coincidence we put in a bunch of numbers there, because these all add up to at least 60 possibilities. The reason I brought this up is I think it's important to realize that it's not, it goes back to that theme originally that we talked about. It's not sufficient to just put in the firewall, because you're probably only looking at one layer of the network, and you're only looking at a part, and you're looking at maybe managing it at best and maintaining it. But that's only maybe one of the 60 possibilities that are out there. But worse yet, if you take the network and you kind of break that down, you're looking at your metro networks, your LAN, as well as your WAN, and they themselves have different kind of solutions in there. So there's a lot of things that can be done, and you're probably asking yourselves, great, you've successfully kind of overwhelmed me and told me how many possibilities there are, which is a lot. It's at least 180 times whatever you'd put in there. Where do I start? Well, we think ISO 27001 and the standards related to 27K are a great start. It advocates kind of the pillars of the security model, at least as we've posed them. But we should also be in a position to characterize this before we kind of get to prioritization. So here's another mental model that I personally like to use, and this is something that I picked up from both the SONS and the NIST framework, is we call the 4-quadrant model. And you characterize a risk in terms of either whether it's intentional or accidental, or external or internal. I think a lot of us would guess that the majority of breaches and causes for break-ins and kind of hacks happen in the intentional external quadrant. Well, it turns out that's actually not the case. Overall, it turns out internal accidental, if you wonder who makes the accident, turns out to be either human beings, or it's a lack, for example, a lack of communication, something gets misconfigured. Not so much someone tripping over a cable, but it's oftentimes we chalk it up to a lack of communication or completion or thoroughness of a project. For example, segmenting a network horizontally is not fully completed, or it's not maintained, or someone forgot about it. That actually accounts for 38% of the characterizations of the breaches that we see. So a way to think about risk, and we line them up around 2 axes here: the probability of an event occurring and times its impact. And I think a lot of the folks who are attending here today are kind of familiar with this little 2-axis model. But where do you start? Let's start with the things that are the most probable and going to give you the biggest risk. And then you eventually work your way down to the things that are least probable and have the least risk. So you kind of navigate your way, a little bit of a zigzag pattern there. If you kind of combine it with the ability to figure out what your channels are, what the parts, processes, people are, understand how to characterize them, you can fill in this matrix, and now you have at least a priority in which to start executing. Because having a plan is certainly important, but being organized allows you to be able to execute on small victories and get to your objective at the end of the day. The mountain will not seem as overwhelming as if you have a plan that can be broken down into digestible chunks. So at least those first 3 steps are what I'd certainly advocate in terms of an organizational framework to start breaking up a seemingly very, very large task into smaller digestible chunks that you can at least demonstrate success. So in terms of the execution, we're certainly proponents of the NIST framework, and in terms of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And there are a whole bunch of activities that are associated with each of these phases here. I won't read these all out, But again, this makes it digestible. And each of these is kind of backed by certifications and compliance like SOC 1, SOC 2, PIPEDA, HIPAA. You can end up gaining a lot of compliance if you start implementing things in a kind of an organized fashion this way. Again, you can only respond to those things that you can kind of detect and in turn, kind of identify to begin with. It's kind of hard to recover from something if you don't know what you're responding to. So again, following kind of an ordered approach that way really allows you to set some priorities and start executing and putting some victories under your belt. So again, the advantages of having a managed security partner, again, not so much on a shameless plug, but we've done this for a living. We've helped out some companies large and small, whether they're from oil or gas or to energy, logistics and transportation, and through to healthcare. We even have government clients, and we've written their playbooks on how to respond to these types of events. And that being said, there are a few key takeaways here that I would leave you with. Having focused expertise is really important because you want to focus on what you do best. And having proactive solutions is going to be one of the important things to have rather than just only purely responsive to say, okay, you know what, something has happened, let me restore from a backup. So that's my kind of portion of that. I'm going to turn it over actually and introduce Kareem and have him take you through a little bit of what they'll talk about, and then Chris will follow up on that. So Kareem, thanks for coming by today.
Thank you, Akshay. And just to continue with what you were saying, what I really wanted to speak to today was how digital transformation is changing the way that we look at security and securing our customers' environments, and how we have to have a security transformation with that. So to kick it off, DX, what is that? Well, digital transformation is the integration of digital technology into all areas of business. And this is fundamentally changing how organizations operate on a day-to-day basis. If you look at how with Internet of Things, we have so many more devices that are connected to the network today. And with each device that's connected, that's another vulnerability. So we have to make sure that as we are approaching and are in the digital transformation, we're prepared for security transformation so that we're prepared to handle the threats that can result. Security transformation, what is this? Well, this is the integration of security into all areas of digital technology. So as we look at that, and you look at the fact that today we have thermostats, we have fridges, we have TVs, there's an onslaught of devices that are connected to our networks. And with all of these devices, it becomes more and more difficult to secure our networks. And that's why it's very important that as we continue to evolve, we look at evolving our strategy around security. Then you have to also look at things like SSL inspection. Encrypted traffic is on the rise. And if you don't have a network solution that is able to detect encrypted traffic, then your organization is at a disadvantage. So that's very important when evaluating a security solution for your organization. And then you got to factor in the cloud. There's so many more ways for the bad guys to not only get malware into your network, but there's a lot more ways for the bad guys to get important data out of your network with cloud applications like Dropbox. So these are things that you have to consider when you're looking at securing your network and your environment, and you got to make sure you're moving with a vendor that can address all of these different concerns. The other complexity is too many point solutions. So one of the major factors to networks being vulnerable is human error, right? Who's managing the network? And when they're managing the network, how efficient and capable are they to address all of the concerns across the entire attack surface as this attack surface is growing? Having too many point products in the network, while it's great that you can have a point product that can address your endpoint, you can have another solution for your firewall, you can have another solution for your mail. It's great to have all these different solutions, but the disadvantage with all these different point products is they don't speak to each other, and you're not able to share the threat information across your entire network. So if an endpoint finds a new threat, are you able to share that information with the core of your network or your cloud applications to make sure everything is protected? That's something that's very important to consider. And then as the entire network is rapidly changing, you got to look at automation. So now that you have different solutions within your network to secure the different vulnerabilities, how are you able to not only have a very automated and quick response to the vulnerabilities that are detected. So it's very key to make sure that with whatever solution you're moving forward with, automation is something it can do very seamlessly. So when we look at securing the network, we realize that a lot of our customers today are looking at a similar framework to this as we have right here. So the first thing you got to do is identify the attack surface. Well, up until today, a lot of our customers have done this by getting a firewall that can protect against the known threats. That's great. You've accomplished step one. But we're far past the days where having a firewall at the edge of your network is enough. You got to be able to now detect against the unknown threats and unknown malware that's out there and that can hit your network with things like ransomware and the new zero-day threats. How do you do that? Well, that's where a sandboxing appliance can come in and help save the day, and where we can detect unknown malware and be able to now protect your entire environment against new targeted threats that are reaching your organization. As we move from detecting the unknown threats, again, you got to have a rapid response. So you detected an unknown threat. Now, how do you make sure that the entire network is able to benefit from the new response that you have to these threats? And then you got to have a continuous trust assessment and make sure that not only are you detecting against known and unknown threats, but how are you continually making sure that all your policies are updated and you have the proper security ranking to ensure that moving forward, your organization has the best security posture. So Chris is going to jump in and explain how at Fortinet we can accomplish these things.
Thank you very much, Kareem. So before I get started, one of the big things that is a tremendous strength of Fortinet is integration between our products. And the integration really lends itself to an analytics side and a management side. The products that I'm going to be talking about all tightly integrate together, both from an analytics perspective and a management perspective. So what we're seeing on the slide right now, we have cloud security, which is a huge trend right now in the industry of outsourcing your services into the cloud. But one of the challenges there is visibility of what's happening in the cloud. Fortinet products will integrate with that service, and I'll talk a little bit about more going forward. Number of products we have for AWS, Azure, and other cloud offerings as well. Also very important, was touched on previously, was IoT and OT security. You really want to understand what your network is doing these days. And as Kareem mentioned, their individual point products can often make that very difficult to do. You have a lot of data points that you can't always correlate together. And so what I'm going to be touching on going forward is how our products can allow you to have that visibility into what's happening on your network and be able to see what's happening. One of the three key takeaways of the Fortinet Security Fabric is broad, integrated, and automated. And the diagram you can see on the right-hand side, at the heart of that is our Forti operating system, FortiOS, which is on our FortiGate appliance. Surrounding that is all the various products which directly integrate with our FortiGates. So Kareem mentioned for unknown threats, we have our Forti Sandbox. Also rounding out through our products, FortiNAC, Network Access Control, FortiClient for endpoints. Up on the left hand around the 11 o'clock position there, we have connectors and API connectors for APIs and DevOps. So we have RESTful APIs that can be tied into. At the very top is probably some of the most important aspect of the entire security fabric, and that's your overall management and analytics. Our FortiSIM product as well gives you visibility as well. FortiGate VM, I touched a little bit about products in the cloud. So FortiGate is offered in, I believe, every cloud available right now, including Alibaba. FortiWeb on the right-hand side, and then FortiMail as well. That actually directly ties in with Sandbox as well for handling unknown email threats. This particular slide there's a lot of data here, but if I can just kind of quickly touch on the important parts of this, or the entire scope of it is important, but the key aspects of it. On the far right-hand side, again, we have our management and analytics side, FortiAnalyzer and FortiManager. And moving to the left, Forti Sandbox, which again gives you a tremendous visibility into unknown threats and zero-day threats. The Forti Switch, FortiNAC, and FortiAP. Those products offer, again, increased visibility on your overall network. Who's plugging into your network, what is plugged into your network, whether it be wired or wireless. Moving further across to the left, FortiWeb, FortiMail, FortiClient, again, just giving you again visibility into what is happening on the edge of your network, on the perimeter of your network, with regards to mail and also endpoint protection. Left-hand side over, again, we have our FortiGate products. Moving further left in the open ecosystem, we're not doing this by ourselves. We tie into a number of other products as well through API, and again, that's just for the purposes of giving you the visibility into your network. And to round it out on the left-hand side, network security, SD-WAN, I'm going to touch on that going forward on another slide, but it really gives a tremendous opportunity to secure the hybrid cloud approach. And like I said, I'll talk about that going forward. One of the things that makes Fortinet products unique is FortiGuard. FortiGuard is largely based out of Burnaby, BC, so Canadian-based, where we have ongoing threat research. And what we do, we aggregate all the information from our firewalls across the globe, and this information comes out, is delivered both in threat research reports. It's delivered also in signatures, whether that be on your FortiGate for IPS or antivirus. We have data from our FortiSandbox pouring into it as well. And I think on the very top, on the right-hand side, 500 zero-day threats discovered, and this is from our data coming from our devices, and we're finding these threats. So this particular slide that I have up right now is current as of January 2019. What's very, very fascinating about this is from time to time we do receive updates to this data, and what I find very fascinating is seeing it change. In the top left-hand corner, 65,000 botnet CNC attempts thwarted per minute. That number, I believe, on a previous slide that I've seen in the past several months was actually much higher. But what I noticed was in the center, network intrusion attempts at 10 million resisted per minute. That number was, I believe, somewhere around 1.2 million. So you find these really interesting swings in what is happening around the globe and what's happening in this industry. And I think that's a really big strength of Fortinet is we're not just taking a trend and saying, well, that's the trend, that's the way it's going to be. We're constantly evaluating what's happening, and we're constantly pushing that data out to signatures for use on our products, and also our FortiGate, FortiSandbox products, and numerous other Fortinet products are feeding that information to FortiGuard, and we're constantly adapting to what the threat landscape looks like. So the next couple slides, I'm just going to go through a few of our products, just to kind of give you an idea of what's available. And this is by no means the end of our product line, but it's definitely what we're seeing in terms of key products to visibility, and also scaling out for a cloud approach or scaling out your network. So in this particular case, we have IPS, intrusion prevention, SWG, which is a secure web gateway. And a really key aspect of that, and Kareem touched on that a little bit, was SSL decryption. FortiGate products, or the FortiGate firewall, is an extremely strong performer, if not one of the best, for SSL decryption. Somewhere around 80% plus of traffic now is seeing as SSL encrypted. And what does that mean to you? Well, it means you don't see what's in it. You get to see what the URL is, say, cbc.ca, but you don't actually have any visibility to what anybody's doing on cbc.ca. All you see is a URL, and the secure web gateway function using SSL decryption allows you to see what that traffic is. And the bigger picture to that will let you see if anything is being delivered that is SSL encrypted, whether that be from a threat side of things or just simply from understanding what is happening on your network and what is coming into your network. SD-WAN, again, I'm going to touch on that again on the next slide. But SD-WAN is a very unique product in the sense that, a unique service, pardon me, that is offered on the FortiGate that really enables an optimized hybrid cloud approach. And what do I mean by that? The ability to have your firewall make a determination of if you have a service in, let's say, Microsoft Azure or AWS or Google Cloud, GCP, your firewall will decide based on what you have it configured for, an understanding of, does your traffic go out through an interface that most quickly gets to your cloud offering, or does your traffic go back through, say, a direct fiber link into your data center? And what this really allows you to do is really optimize your flow of traffic, and allows you to oftentimes get faster responses and much improved user experience. The perspective of what really makes up the core fabric. FortiOS, I've talked about that already, and then there's a number of features that we can see there that I've touched on. FortiGuard I've discussed as well, and what's really interesting is when you kind of really start understanding what makes up FortiGuard, and I think this slide does a really good example of that. A FortiGuard is no one single thing; it is a collection of data, and how that data is analyzed and what is done with that data is incredibly important. And on the right-hand side, parallel processing, one of the extremely unique things, if not one of the most unique things about our physical appliances, is that Fortinet prides itself on being an engineering company. And what does that mean? Well, Fortinet engineers its own processors in our FortiGate firewalls. And that gives us exceptionally high performance when it comes to things like SSL decryption. That's also touched on less latency as well, the notation there. And that, again, when it comes to SSL decryption, can be an extremely top-heavy thing to do, but our technology is able to do that because we're doing those things in hardware. And we're very proud of what we what we've put together. So for anyone that may be on the webinar and going on the multi-cloud journey, so to speak, FortiGate products or Fortinet products, we have our FortiCASB, Cloud Access Security Broker. And what that does is it gives you a glimpse or gives you control into what people are doing in the cloud. And what does that mean for the cloud? It's Dropbox, Box.com, Azure. Effectively, CASB allows you to have full visibility and governance around exactly what your users are doing. Fortinet connectors is another one. Again, we're not doing this by ourselves. We want to make sure that you're able to connect into whatever third-party cloud offering you're using. And again, our FortiGate firewall available virtual machine and in the cloud as well. So for example, in Azure for the marketplace, we do have a number of products available there as well, just as an example. Web application security, we have our FortiWeb, which is going to be a web application firewall. And then we also have FortiADC, which is effectively a load balancer. Again, we have those available, physical appliance, virtual machine, hosted, and cloud solution. I won't dive too far into those, but again, the emphasis here is understanding what makes up your security fabric. And if you're looking to, if you have a number of point products right now and you're looking to consolidate, we do have our products available. Email security, I touched a little bit on FortiMail. FortiMail, again, is available as an appliance, virtual machine, hosted, and cloud. We talked a little bit about phishing, and again, we talked a little bit about spear phishing as well. Does, again, tie in with FortiSandbox, which is on the next slide. And again, FortiSandbox I think is a really interesting product. You're taking an unknown sample, and it's being placed into a virtual machine on the sandbox, and it's being analyzed. And sometimes it can be absolutely nothing, and other times it can really be something. But our analytics of what actually happens with that piece of that unknown sample, is it malware? Is it nothing? This is our product that helps you determine that. And again, this is a product that ties directly back into the center of that graphic to the network, which is FortiOS. And that ensures that you are, if a piece of malware, if a sample is determined to be a piece of malware, that signature is updated to FortiOS, your FortiGate. And again, if you're using another product such as FortiClient, it's updated there immediately. So again, tight integration and management and analytics are all being tied together to form the security fabric. I mentioned FortiClient. We also have for Enterprise Management Server as well. I see it in the space that I predominantly work in the education sector of schools using Chromebooks. And a great example is we have the capability to manage Chromebooks from a tree. When the Chromebook is taken off premises, off net, so to speak, you have the ability to control what the user experience will be in terms of what websites are available and that sort of thing. FortiClient, again, endpoint protection, that ties again back into FortiSandbox as well, and also the FortiGate for visibility into what the users are doing. Secure unified access. This is talking about our 40 access points, our 40 wireless our wireless infrastructure, 40 switch, which is our switching offering, and also 40 authenticator and 40 token. For if you're interested in two-factor, 40 token is available that way. Again, in terms of where they're offered, in some cases offered hosted for some of those products. Obviously, 40 switch is a physical product, and appliance and virtual machine as well available. So coming down to the end of the slides I'm going through to kind of round things out, where I started with is the management analytics side of things, and this is definitely where, you know, it's often great to say that you have fantastic point products, but if they can't talk together and you cannot look somewhere and understand what's happening across your entire network, it's tough to make a case for that. So FortiAnalyzer at the top there, again, I've mentioned a little bit. FortiAnalyzer is specifically to our Fortinet products. FortiSIM at the bottom is for getting visibility inside for products outside of the Fortinet suite. FortiCloud, we have a number of our products that are available through cloud management, and also FortiManager is going to be your central management suite for FortiGate. You can also get visibility into FortiAccessPoint, FortiSwitch as well. Policy control, enforcement. It's definitely the product for overseeing all your configurations, and when it comes to, say, unified configurations or the word is eluding me, I apologize, but overall an analysis of what the scope of your configuration looks like. I touched a little bit about that we're not out here doing this by ourselves. These are a number of different companies that that are Fabric Ready partners that we connect with, that our different devices and services will connect with in some way to gain information from and tie into. So this is, you know, the emphasis here is that we're not just out here by ourselves. We definitely want to, you know, work together, and it just results in a more secure and better environment for you. Most of my career was spent on the customer-facing side. So a lot of you that are listening right now and watching, I sat where you're sitting right now watching a webinar, and I've heard a lot of vendors talk about their products, but what really was important to me and what still is important to me is how third parties view our products. And in this particular case, the data we have on right now is Gartner and NSS Labs. Both of these are third party. Fortinet does not pay any of these organizations for their results. So right now we see this is just an overall ranking of Fortinet, how it compares to our competitors. Gartner Magic Quadrant, we're firmly in the upper right-hand corner. And again, this is current data. I'm not showing you slides from years ago. And so the slide on the left is as of September 2018, and slide on quadrant on the right is from 2018, or pardon me, July 2018. NSS Labs, we have a number of recommendations through NSS Labs, and one of the ones that is not included on here is a very most recent one of FortiClient achieving 100% success of malware detection. But again, so NSS Labs, they're a completely independent third party. We don't pay them for results. They receive our equipment and our competitors' equipment. They evaluate it, and then they put out their score. And again, across the top, 9 recommendations out of 9. And that about wraps it for my time right now. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris and Kareem. Really important for us to kind of be working with partners that support our overall view, and you know, we're again very grateful and thankful to both of you coming down and giving us both your time and your knowledge, kind of taking us through the scope of the capabilities. So we're just going to go through, I guess, a summary, kind of a Q&A, but let me start with a little bit of a summary. So, you know, we wanted to just basically overall just emphasize the need for a holistic approach to security that spans not just parts, but also the people in the process, and arm everyone with a couple of, you know, for example, mental models, whether it's a 4-quadrant approach or if it's a 2-axis model. And again, we'll send the notes out to anyone who's interested. You know, please contact us. We're happy to send you out the slides and the models themselves, as well as a white paper that you know, we have on security, and the types of playbooks that you can use to help you basically prioritize, to set realistic goals and achieve them with a managed approach. A holistic approach is, you know, I think the only way to go these days, and at least that's what the stats and what all the evidence says these days. And you know, I think our partners and our vendors have told us something very similar. Adopting a modern IT security standard, I think, means handling things as inevitable rather than probable, and then having a process to be able to recover from it rather than relying only on people. And so beyond the firewall, we clearly know that, you know, not least because of the things that Chris has kind of taken us through, that beyond the perimeter, but also securing the perimeter, and how to be able to productively manage that and not get in the way of business processes is also really important. Whether it's protecting the endpoint or whether it's having a full dashboard view of what's going on within the WAN, LAN, or within the metropolitan area. It's just about building a really good fabric to be able to take all that data, analyze it, and then give feedback. And so, kind of the bottom line there comes down to really it's about classification, characterization, prioritization, and execution. And while those sound simple, they are quite, they can be quite dense. But again, if we take away a couple of models that help you prioritize and be able to execute in that in small chunks, we believe not only you'll prevail, but we think we can be, along with our partners, a significant kind of ingredient and a good catalyst to that change and transformation within your organizations. So I'm going to kind of open it up to questions at this point and turn it over to our marketing head, Anusha, here. There were a few questions that we had that came in. One was for Fortinet, a couple of them for Pathway. So the first question that we had was, the Canadian government is undergoing some changes with respect to privacy regulations with respect to IT security and information security, and how is Pathway keeping up for that? So that's a great question. We've been, very ardent supporters of things like, ISO 27001, PCI, and SOC, HIPAA, PHIPAA, FIPA, PIPEDA, and right from the beginning, we've been user advocates in the sense that informed consent, making sure people easily understand in plain English terms how their data is being used, what is being done with their infrastructure, and that they have the ultimate choice. These are the types of positions we've taken on it. To that extent, it is fully our intention to be able to support GDPR-like controls within our organization and to make them understandable. And while we are not a data-based organization in the sense that we are not like a Facebook or a Google that monetizes the user data, we believe in the use of controls to be able to help organizations safeguard their data. So if you are a data-driven organization, so we have the capability to be able to help you build the controls in order to make that happen, whether it's PHIPAA or PIPEDA or whether it's GDPR. And those are, just FYI, those are laws. For example, PIPEDA is not something, that's like an optional thing. And GDPR in the EU happens to be a law that they've passed. So, in a long-winded way, we fully intend to pursue those certifications and practices, and that's fully in line with our philosophy of governance. Second question that we had was with respect to new technologies like AI and the big data boom. How is Pathway innovating with respect to these trends? Well, we've been at the forefront of doing a lot of this stuff. Whether it's using tools like TensorFlow, or whether we're doing machine learning internally, there's a fair bit of our automation framework internally within Pathway that is based on machine learning and AI, where we look for patterns. Part of it is for security, part of it is for automation, and innovation is really the lifeblood of a company like Pathway. We're not a massive $200 billion organization, but we believe through focus comes excellence. And for an organization of our size, we happen to be leveraging quite a lot of cutting edge tools within that, including on AI and ML. So for example, we do have our own kind of design labs, and we are incubating further ventures that leverage AI and ML quite heavily. And the last question we got here is actually for, I guess I could let either of Chris or Gabriel handle this. It's for Fortinet. What is the current cutting edge technology that Fortinet is working on right now? And could you tell us a little bit more about that?
It's a really good question. So I think there's a number of things that come to mind. I think FortiGuard Labs is one thing that comes to mind when we're talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning. It's definitely something that Fortinet is investing heavily into. And I think from a threat research perspective, that in itself is very important. Also, I guess in terms of where Fortinet is investing, I touched a little bit about on the FortiASIC side of things. And when you look at SSL encryption, if I can go back to that example again, more and more traffic is becoming SSL encrypted, and you really see organizations such as Google pushing that, for example. And I think going forward, that's going to become an incredibly important thing for any firewall vendor, any security vendor to be aware of, is encrypted traffic. And I think from an innovation point of view, I think Fortinet has really is at the forefront when it comes to technologies that decrypt and view and understand what that traffic is. Kareem, I don't know if there's anything you want to. Yeah. So one of the notes that, so Kareem just passed along the room to me here is SD-WAN is another really good example. I talked about that a little bit. As you see more and more going to the cloud, the firewall is going to become more and more responsible for first of all, understanding that traffic, which I can reference again back to SSL if I want to, and also, where that how that traffic is going to be handled. Kareem, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on to that.
Well, and just to add to that, with the SD-WAN conversation, obviously there's a lot of vendors in the market that can do SD-WAN. However, we're the only vendor that bridges our SD-WAN capabilities with our firewalls out of one appliance. So we're the only vendor in the market that can do security and SD-WAN out of one. It's not an additional license. It's built into our firewalls natively, and it's a big differentiator, and it obviously helps from a cost perspective when you don't have to outsource from two different vendors to accomplish security and your SD-WAN needs.
So SD-WAN and kind of brings up an important topic for me too, personally, where we've started to see the movement a lot towards hybrid and towards multi-location and distributed client base, or even an operating base for companies as well. A lot of people are working from home these days, and whether multi-location. So for example, in the healthcare industry, we've got quite a few clients who've got upwards of 80 to 120 different locations. And how do you kind of centralize the management and kind of conveniently manage it with having a central console to be able to gain all the threat intelligence from all these areas, and plus allow people to get in and out of those networks easily. So for example, if you have to use one uplink for your business traffic and another one is for other traffic that's used within the organization, or you have to go off to an MPLS using a different methodology. I'm certainly a proponent of using kind of integrated appliances so that you don't end up having device and vendor sprawl. Thanks for that kind of update there. That's good to know. And I think some of our partners and our clients and folks who we're working with out there are certainly wondering, how does this all fit into the hybrid world? Can they tie in co-location to cloud, et cetera? And I think that certainly gives a clearer answer, because it doesn't seem to be an all or nothing. There are use cases where people want to keep certain assets on site because they are highly valuable to them, and they're not just quite ready to move it into the colo or cloud just yet. But for certain other areas where, okay, maybe we want to put our archival data into a colo, and then maybe our CRM sits somewhere maybe in Dynamics and 365. How can we kind of securely tie all that together? Have these types of unified and multi-cloud solutions for threat management and intelligence is certainly helpful to know, because I know that is certainly a topic that has been coming to me a lot recently out of the CTO group here at Pathway. I certainly get that asked out a lot. So thanks for that. We're certainly grateful again for your time to come down here, folks. And do we have any other questions from our audience? I guess I'll open it up to the floor. All right. Well, I think we certainly want to thank everyone who had attended today. Our marketing team will be in touch with each one of you who is kind of interested in getting a copy of the slides. We will be, by the way, pasting up a copy of this on our channel up on YouTube in the coming days, and be chopping it up into segments that'll be a little bit easier to kind of listen, so you don't have to kind of hear my voice for the entire 1 hour. And by the way, we certainly want to thank everyone for participating. And we had promised a draw was a gift certificate to Amazon, and we'll be announcing those very soon and let you know via email. So again, thank you to everyone who attended. Chris Green, again, thank you for coming down. Thank you for your time. We much appreciate it. And until next time, we're signing off. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.